Solway. There's a topic that I failed to mention when I was discussing relative pronouns in the last video, and relative clauses, well, specifically relative pronouns, is the idea that in Latin and in all Romance languages, and even to a small extent in English, nouns and pronouns are gendered. It's not the same as what you would think. We use the word gender nowadays. So if you've taken French or Spanish, you know that a table is feminine. Why? Just because somebody decided it was. A wall is masculine. Why? Just because someone decided it was. It's actually even more simple than that. It's really because there's a group of words that are spelled in the same way as a whole big group of nouns that do actually refer to females and women, and so they just say, oh, well, it's spelled the same way, let's make it feminine. Likewise, there's another huge group of nouns that are spelled the same way as things that are mostly masculine, so we'll just make them masculine. So murus, meaning wall, is spelled the same as caecilius, make them both masculine. It works for like 99% of the nouns that you'll encounter. There is, however, a third option, in that in Latin, there are neuter nouns. And in English, most of our nouns that don't refer to people are neuter. That's why we say the wall, we say it is a thing. We don't say she. Anyway, so this is the idea. We have grammatical gender. And this shouldn't be a surprise to you, because way back in stage 1 or 2, when I first started teaching you certain adjectives, I would give you the masculine and the feminine form. So I would give you lightus and lighta. I'd say, this is a servus lightus, he's a happy slave, but this is a ancilla lighta, she is a happy slave girl. This shouldn't be too difficult for you. And the same thing with pronouns in English. We have gendered pronouns in English. We say he and she and it. But we haven't really learned pronouns too much in Latin. We will, except for the pronoun of the day, qui, quae, quod. So how does gender in relative pronouns, how do they go together? Well, if pronouns replace a noun, that's the job of a pronoun, is to replace or refer to a noun, and nouns have gender, well, the pronouns have to have gender too. So let's look at some examples and see how this works. Aquila est animus, qui ad Deus ascendit. The eagle is a spirit who, or which, rises to the gods. Right, so animus, it's got that US that we recognize because we know caecilius and quintus and all these other words. We know that must be masculine. Qui, since it refers to a masculine object, must also be masculine. We would do the same thing if we replaced it with he. In English, we don't have a gendered who, but Latin does. Let's look at another example. Turba, quae propria januum stabat, ad terram procubuit. The crowd, which was standing near the door, fell to the ground. Turba, oh, it's got an A, and we recognize that A from way back when. We know Metella and Ancilla and Melissa. We know all these words that end with an A that all refer to women. And so apparently most things that end with an A, 99% of things that end with A, must also be feminine. So turba must be a feminine noun, which means that the pronoun referring to it must also be feminine. Quae is the feminine who in Latin. Let's take a look at a third example. Plaustrum, quod vides, rotum fractum habet. The wagon, which you can see, has a broken wheel. Plaustrum, well, Plaustrum ends with a um, which we normally associate with accusatives, but we've learned words way back in stage 1. What about atrium, cubiculum, tablinum, forum, venum? We actually have learned a lot of nouns that end with a that aren't accusatives for some reason. This, my friends, is the neuter. We're going to talk about the neuter in more detail later, but for right now, you can identify it because it ain't masculine and it ain't feminine. This is a second declension word in the neuter. You can't rely on it being a thing to know that it's neuter. That's just not how Romance languages work. It's neuter because it's neuter. The wagon, quad, is referring back to the wagon, so it must be neuter, which you can see, right? So there we go. We have masculine pronouns, we have feminine pronouns, and we have neuter pronouns. Qui, quai, quad. Things get a little bit more tricky in the third declension because you don't have the handy US to help you identify a masculine. You don't have the A, as we have in the first declension, help you identify a feminine. For instance, Leo. Is that masculine or feminine? Well, it means lion. Would it surprise you to know that there's a Latin word for lioness? So this one must be masculine. What about this? Canis means dog. This is kind of a trick question because it's both masculine and feminine. It depends on what gender of the animal you're talking about. Principes. This means chief. So it doesn't have anything there to help me identify about, but the meaning, chief, must be masculine. It's easier in first and second declension because first is mostly feminine and second is mostly masculine. If you don't know, if you can't tell, then there's only one thing you can do, and it's to look it up. Now, moving forward on our vocabulary sheets, there will be a little letter following a noun. M for masculine noun, F for feminine noun, and N for neuter noun. So if we look at our vocabulary list, we see the noun aqua has an F. And so it says right there, clear as day, that it is a feminine noun. Effigies, effigium. This one was not easy to tell. It means statue. Is a statue masculine, feminine, or neuter? Thanks to that handy little letter, you know it's feminine. Equus is a horse. Well, it belongs to the second declension. Most things in the second declension are masculine or neuter. But it's got the US, so that's our masculine thing, right? Lectus, the same thing. It's got that M there to help us know it's a couch, or a couch is masculine. Why? Just because it's spelled the same way. We get to mare, right? Means the sea, and we see that this is a neuter noun. Mare is a neuter noun. That N right there tells us it's neuter. Thank you, little N. And then the next one is something I want to talk about. Nauta means sailor, and you see that that is a masculine noun. In the first declension, nearly all the nouns are feminine, except for jobs that are typically associated with men, like agricola, poeta, nauta. In the second declension, if it ends with a US, then guaranteed that it is a masculine noun, unless it's a tree, like quercus means oak, and that's feminine. So always, if you are unsure, always look at the vocabulary, because now it will tell you, which is pretty handy. So let's go back to the model sentences and see what things that we notice with these relative pronouns. Senex qui sceptrum tenebat rex cogidebnis. Okay, so let's look at the qui. Qui is a relative pronoun. Who is referring to? It's referring to the senex, who's an old man. Therefore, qui must be masculine. How is it being used in the clause, though? If we put the old man back in, the old man was holding the scepter, then it's being used as a nominative. So this is a masculine, and it's a nominative form. Femina quae coronam gerebat regina. The woman who was wearing a crown was the queen. So quae is referring back to the femina. Therefore, what do we know about the femina? Obviously, she's female. Therefore, femina must be feminine. If we replace the woman back in, where we took her out for the who, we say that the queen was wearing a crown. She's being used as a nominative. She's the one doing it. Donum quod rega maxime delectavit erat equus. The gift which the king liked a lot was a horse. Quad is referring back to the donum, the gift. How is quad being used here? Let's find out. If we replace the gift back in where we took it out, then we would get in this clause, we'd say the gift delighted the king a lot, and it's being used as a nominative. Vinum quod ancile ferebant erat in patera aurea. The wine which the slave girls were bringing was in a golden platter. Vinum is neuter, and quad, therefore, must also be neuter. But wait a second, how is it being used? Wine slave girls were carrying. Well, the slave girls were carrying the wine, and so quad must be accusative here. Let's try number 5. Agnes quem servus ducebat ad victima. All right, so Agnes is the lamb, which the slave was leading, was the sacrificial victim. We have quem here, referring back to the Agnes. Agnes is masculine, therefore quem must also be masculine. But how is it being used here? Let's replace it. The lamb slave was leading. Well, the slave was leading the lamb, so the lamb, quem, here is accusative. Victima quam servus tenebat ballavit. The victim which the slave was holding, bleated. Okay, victima ends with an A, so it's probably feminine. Quam is referring back to the victima, so it also must be feminine. How is it being used? Let's replace the victim back in there and find out. The victim the slave was holding. Well, the slave was holding the victim, so quam here must be accusative. Genders, it's a thing. All right, and that's that.